2022 was a banner year for video games. Headlined by the monumental release of Elden Ring, the year also brought us such juicy releases as Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Vampire Survivors, Total Warhammer 3, Citizen Sleeper, and other games I'm probably forgetting. In fact, this trend has continued well into 2023, and the Great Gamer Feast is starting to look more and more like a multi-year event. Amidst the sequence of incredible titles we've gotten these past couple years, there's still one game that I can't seem to stop thinking about, even over a year after finishing it. Square Enix's Triangle Strategy. In my mind, Triangle Strategy is the game of 2022, and is a standout title that easily sits up with the best releases of the past decade. Games of Triangle's ilk typically don't command as widespread attention as your Elden Rings and God of Wars, and the glut of quality titles in the past 30 months hasn't helped its visibility problems at all. However, I still think that when the dust settles, Triangle Strategy will stand the test of time, and will grow to be a must-play for gamer lads and lassies generations down the line. Now, that's a bold statement, but I'm prepared to back it up, and that's one of the reasons why I let this game marinate on my mind for a year before I set out to formalize my opinions on it. I knew when I finished it that it was a special game and I enjoyed every moment, but sometimes you just can't trust that feeling. Sometimes, after you sit on a game, the issues and flaws start to become a little more visible, and the experience may lose its sheen a bit. There's nothing wrong with that. An important part of evaluating an experience is being able to admit the flaws with a game, and it does nothing to tarnish the positive experiences you might have with it. With Triangle Strategy though, I found the opposite happened. The more I sat on it, the more I appreciated it. Now I do have to get one thing out of the way here, and it is that I am a turn-based RPG junkie. Any JRPG or TRPG that hits the market has my immediate attention, and the second that Triangle was announced and the demo released, I downloaded and played it that very night. However, my love for this particular genre also means I'm a little more discerning when it comes to these games. The more I play them, the more I develop opinions about the various mechanics and design choices unique to those systems. Have you ever had a dessert? Bear with me here. Have you ever had like a slice of cake or perhaps a pie or a milkshake that was just so delectable or sublime that you mentioned to the person next to you, or perhaps your limited edition Hatsune Miku figurine, "Man, this is rich." Now, a particularly rich dessert isn't exactly a bad thing, but it can be so powerful that you can only indulge in it sparingly. And this is how I felt about Triangle Strategy. If there is anything negative I can drum up about the game, it is that Triangle Strategy is tremendously rich. And although I adored every bite of it, I wasn't sure I was ready to jump into another playthrough of the game after I saw the credits roll for the first time. But yet, sitting here a year later, I find myself craving that experience once again, just like that piece of chocolate cake or milkshake. Like one of those big milkshakes where they take the whole slice of cheesecake and they just like shove it. So let's rapid fire the gist of Triangle Strategy real quick. Your protagonist is Serenoa, the heir apparent of one of 3 kingdoms. These kingdoms share an uneasy peace following years of warfare over the resources of salt and iron. One of the kingdoms controls most of the salt, another controls most of the iron, and Serenoa's kingdom does something else. The game follows the traditional party-based RPG system, with characters coming in and out of the party, each with their own unique sets of skills and mechanics. This is my first design note on Triangle Strategy. Each of the characters in the game is utterly unique. This isn't a situation where different characters can slot into different roles based on adjusting their class or stats. If you have a character that shoots a bow or does magic, that's all that character is going to do. Now, some players might find this limiting, and I completely understand that position. I personally enjoy more defined roles and skills for individual characters, but if you enjoy fiddling with the characters and their abilities, you might not be able to scratch that itch in this game. One thing I will say on that note, however, is that there is a tremendous glut of characters here, and each and every one has a different role and focus on the battlefield, and can find utility in some way, shape, or form. There is, I kid you not, a character whose special ability involves the creation of ladders. And here's the astonishing part about Triangle Strategy: that ability is actually useful, but more on that later. Through the course of this review, I'll frequently compare Triangle Strategy to another tactical RPG, Record of Agarest War. Now, that comparison may seem out of pocket, but I think it's a useful one because everything that Triangle Strategy does right, Record of Agarest War does wrong. And you can see this firstly in the way the different characters operate. Where the characters of Triangle Strategy are completely unique in their mechanical operation, the characters in Agarest War are largely the same. Each character in this game actually draws from the same universal pool of skills and abilities, and the game even offers a system where you can directly distribute a bank of skill points to the stats of those characters. While on the surface this might appear like it offers a wealth of creative customization options, in practice it wound up being the exact opposite. In Agarest War, I wound up simply giving the best and most game-breaking skills to all of my characters, and maxing out the stats that optimized those abilities. As the game went on, I found that I was just cheesing out enemies with those same skills, not really giving any consideration to a greater strategy beyond that. Yes, some characters did things slightly better than others, but it felt like a situation where I was approaching each battle with the exact same mindset, the exact same objective, and the exact same way to pursue that objective. Now let's go back to triangle strategy. The uniqueness of the characters is in fact limiting, that is true, but this is just how it appears on the surface, because limitation breeds creativity. Let's go back to the latter character for a moment. While his ability may seem silly and irrelevant at first, when you approach it in the context of the whole party and the mechanics of the game, his utility becomes slightly more clear. Triangle strategy has a mechanic where ranged characters get more range at higher ground, enabling them to target enemies they wouldn't be able to at lower levels of the map. One of the first characters you have access to in the game is a character who rides a giant eagle who can reach those high places, directly exposing you to how this mechanic works. As the game goes on, however, you're introduced to characters who use ranged weapons but don't have a built-in way of reaching those high places. The only way that you can get up there is to have a bird mount or a ladder. Are you putting it together yet? Ladder Man might seem like an odd character, but using him in creative ways in tandem with the mechanics of the game world enables you to utilize and access creative strategies that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. This is genius, and it's only one example. Triangle strategy is full of nuanced interactions like this. The design of the characters subtly encourages you to interact with the game's mechanics in creative ways, and Triangle is absolutely packed with them. There are mechanics associated with how your characters are positioned, who they're attacking next to, whether or not it's raining, what sort of terrain you're on. Each battle and arena is packed with mechanics and systems to exploit, if you have the creativity and desire to do so. You don't have to utilize the environmental effects to your advantage, but you certainly have the option if you would like it. Each choice in the battle matters, and in fact that's another major theme of the game as a whole: choice. When it comes to choices matter mechanics in games, they often go something like this. You have 2 or more dialogue options. You choose one and, oh, this character died? Oh gosh, I wonder how this will impact the game. Oh, it doesn't? Okay. Oh, well, I wonder what effects this will have on the way I play and interact with the, oh, none whatsoever? Okay. Or maybe your character is just evil now. It's easy for devs to have your choices impact the narrative of the game or the way it ends. I'm not saying that's a bad thing inherently, but you can go a little farther. What I'm interested in are choices that affect the gameplay. The game that got me really thinking about this was the Banner Saga. Another TRPG, I know, I'm nothing if not on brand. The Banner Saga has some crucial choices matter moments that shake up the story or give you dialogue options that you wouldn't have otherwise, but as I played the game, I realized that there was something else going on. The choices that the game would present in the phases where the caravan was traveling would impact the resources available to me in the preparation phase of the game, which in turn affected the way that I approached the battles. I went from just kind of randomly selecting narrative options, because I have lizard brain you see, to actually pausing and considering what sort of choices I should make to maximize my chances further down the line. It was a really beautiful way to integrate the experience of playing the game into the narrative it was presenting to you. Triangle strategy does a similar thing, in fact it dwells heavily on it. At certain junctures in the story, you must make crucial decisions affecting the trajectory of the party and how they approach certain dilemmas in the narrative. The game has a dedicated phase for this, called the Scales of Conviction, where your party casts votes on what the path forward should be. You do have influence over this process, however. The game allows you to attempt to convince your party members to vote a certain way, and there's a whole host of subtle mechanics associated with this. For example, you can talk to people outside of the castle to glean some more information about the current situation, then use that information in order to appeal your case to your allies. Also, as a side note, there are 3 convictions in the game: morality, liberty, and utility. Your actions in the game will increase your convictions in these 3 directions. The mechanics of the conviction system are a little misty. They seem to largely be associated with your ability to persuade certain allies in the scales of conviction. Certain choices and characters are associated with a particular conviction, but it also seems like some side stories and PCs require certain conviction thresholds to be met as well. Each of the 3 endings is associated with a particular conviction, and the game allows you to start a new game plus after finishing, or you can pursue a different ending than the one you had in the last playthrough. Completing all 3 will then enable you to see a 4th ending, called the Golden Route by fans, naturally, the most satisfying ending. It took me roughly 40 hours to complete one playthrough playing casually, so if you're counting along at home, that's 160 hours of potential playtime with different routes, decisions, and characters, all yours for the price of $60. Oh, and they recently added a free update as well. However, the scales of conviction is just the way the choice is made. The real impact comes from what happens after you make it. Each choice in the game will set you down a different path and possibly lead towards a different battle or situation than you would have found yourself in before. Moreover, certain party members are locked behind certain decisions, so you can go your whole playthrough and not even see a significant amount of playable characters. Not only this, but your party members do not simply go along with whatever you want. The fact that they all vote means they can be very opinionated about which direction to take, to the point that characters will occasionally go in and out of your party at certain decisions. Towards the end of the game, there's a moment where you make the most major choice, which will ultimately decide the ending that you see in that playthrough. No matter what you choose at this point, one character will leave the party permanently. In all cases, this is a party member that has been with you since the beginning of the game, and their absence is felt not just in the story, but on the battlefield as well. In Triangle Strategy, the way you approach the game can change fundamentally after you make certain decisions, and while the overall narrative is mostly the same up until the final couple chapters, albeit with some detours here and there, each of those decision-making moments feels weighty, and you're forced to consider everything on the table when making them. The decision-making moments are well served by the game's pacing, making careful use of the rhythm associated with tactical RPGs. Triangle Strategy is something of a sister title to Octopath Traveler, which was Square Enix's debut of the HD 2D art style that Triangle shares. Additionally, I've heard tell that there's a Dragon's Quest III remake out there somewhere. Any word on that? No? Okay. One of the biggest complaints people had about Octopath was that it seemed a little slow in the pacing. While I adore Octopath, this is a criticism that I have as well. At many points in the game, the progress would grind to a halt while you tried to get some levels or distribute some XP to the point where your party found more success in whatever chapter you were working through. Being a tactical RPG insulates Triangle from some of those issues, since the games naturally have a pacing that feels a little more deliberate. The fact that each battle corresponds with tangible progress in the narrative goes a long way towards making the player feel like they're progressing through the game at a good rate. However, just being a TRPG doesn't completely remedy those problems. Just ask Record of Agarest War. Remember that guy? Agarest War makes one of the single most baffling decisions I have ever seen in a tactical RPG. The addition of random encounters. When you find yourself on the world map in Agarest, there's a chance you will trigger a random battle with enemies en route to your next destination. While this might not sound strange to your average JRPG cat, think about the implications of that for a little bit. Consider your average JRPG random encounter. You blow through a couple goblins. Nice. Or perhaps you just run away. Works just as well. Now consider your average tactical RPG battle. It's not just a matter of selecting an attack for your party member, you have to move every character individually, have them take a turn, then do it for the next character, and the next character, and the next, and then the enemy does the same thing. These battles naturally take longer. Whereas the average Dragon Quest overworld encounter could take 30 to 45 seconds, the average overworld encounter in Agarest War would take 10 to 15 minutes. And that's just walking to your destination. And there could be 3 to 5 of these encounters. It turned the most fundamental gameplay loop into an arduous slog where it felt like I could play for hours and barely make any progress. Triangle obviously doesn't do anything of the sort, but it even goes a step farther. Between battles, it'll actually put you on an automatic airport sidewalk and warp speed you to the next chapter. However, it allows you to pause and take a breath before doing so. You have the option of immediately playing into the next one, but it also gives a moment to do some training, or fiddle with the inventory, or engage with side stories and auxiliary mechanics. Fire Emblem Engage does this almost better, with zero gameplay prohibitions keeping you from diving straight into the next battle. This is contrasted with Fire Emblem Three Houses, where the in-between sections of the battles were stuffed with various gameplay odds and ends that sometimes felt like they were just padding the runtime for no reason in particular. This is especially since Engage took all of those mechanics and just kind of made them options you could engage with at your leisure. People often discuss pacing as if it's a purely narrative function, but the gameplay has its own pacing as well. And it's important to pace it in a way that allows players to explore and interact with the mechanics, but also breathe and consider them as well. A good game knows how it works, and balances those moments where you're in the thick of a flow state and doesn't forget those quiet moments in between. Like any good composition of music, a good game has buildups of tension and anxiety punctuated by a well-timed release of that tension. From the preparation stage of a TRPG to the exhale of finally getting the last enemy's HP to 0. All games have a rhythm, and the best ones know how to use that rhythm to enhance the sensation of the gameplay. Triangle strategy is a quiet, slow burn type of game. It unfolds itself deliberately and leisurely as it introduces you to deeper and deeper uses of its mechanics and systems, and subtly encourages you to be more creative about how you use them as the difficulty slowly heats up. The story is not groundbreaking by any measure, which unfortunately limits its audience to people who are already into turn-based RPGs. But for gameplay-centric cats like myself, you would be hard-pressed to find a more complete and satisfying tactical RPG experience this side of generational heavy hitters like Final Fantasy Tactics. While I'm hesitant to recommend a game like Octopath Traveler to one who doesn't care for JRPGs, Triangle Strategy is a game that I'll eagerly recommend to everyone, just with the caveat that you have to be willing to peel back the layers of its gameplay little by little. Like I said, it's a slow burn, and while that monstrous looking milkshake might seem intimidating at first, if you take it slowly, bite by bite, you might just find one of the sweetest experiences you didn't realize was out there. I cannot say the same for Record of Agarest War.